Words appear on a black background. A film by Vesta Giles.
Every fire that was burning was far enough away that it wasn't a problem.
The remains of a forest devastated by fire appear in an aerial view.
I didn't think it would even reach us.
Words appear. Vandelso Productions.
I knew it was possible, but I didn't think it would. It happens to everybody else, it doesn't happen to us.
Gravity Fair Productions.
Never dreamt that I would be involved in something quite this large, by no means.
The charred timber covers a vast area.
Logan Lake, a small town in the heart of British Columbia's rugged interior, spent 18 years preparing for a wildfire they hoped would never come. And then, in the summer of 2021, it did.
Fire trucks line up outside a station. The blaze is surveyed by helicopter and on horseback. Smoke billows and firefighters work to extinguish the inferno. A title appears, The Test. A man wears a high-vis vest.
My name is Garnet Muro, and I'm a professional forester working for the Logan Lake Community Forest and the District of Logan Lake. Built in 1971 as a mining town, Logan Lake is a quiet community nestled in the heavily forested Highland Valley. Friendly and inviting, the town is a popular destination for fishing and outdoor enthusiasts.
Garnet surveys a forest.
Driven by the threat of wildfires in the region, the town set out on a path to become more fire resilient. In the process, they became early pioneers in what is now known as the FireSmart program.
Kelsey Winter, program lead.
FireSmart is the way everyone in BC can build their wildfire resiliency. So the way they can take steps to protect themselves, their homes, their neighborhoods, and their communities.
The town appears in an aerial view.
We can't all get in a truck and go fight a wildfire or fly a plane or drop retardant, but we all can do something to build our resiliency, and FireSmart's that. It's the way that each of us can access a program that protects ourselves, our neighborhoods, our communities from wildfire.
My name is Kelly Johnston. I've been working in the wildfire field for just over 30 years.
We joke about it, but we call him the father of FireSmart in Canada. He really is one of the reasons why FireSmart is so successful in BC, why it's a national program.
I mainly advise communities, governments on how to increase the resiliency of their community to wildfire.
I think Kelly would be the first person to tell you that if we continue down this road that we do with pushing community wildfire resiliency, then we can actually solve this wildfire disaster problem.
Leafy ground cover grows between trees.
FireSmart Canada started in the mid-90s. Logan Lake was one of the, we like to call them the early adopters. At the time, the mayor, Ella Brown, was very keen on seeing her community become fire resilient.
Ella Brown, former mayor.
What inspired the first activities in Logan Lake was fear.
A date stamp scrolls to 2003.
The summer of 2003 was incredibly bad for fires. That summer was really hot, and the fires were burning like people had never seen before. Particularly the Strawberry Hill fire was of great concern to Logan Lake.
In a photo, thick smoke billows into the air.
In Logan Lake, we're a small community on top of this beautiful hill surrounded by forest. Logan Lake is a recreational community, and it has many paths leading to lakes and people coming in from Tunqua Lake by motorcycle or ATV, and their exhaust systems were starting small fires. And we realized that we were at risk and decided that we really needed to do something to protect our community from fire.
Kelly Johnston.
She received the help from a gentleman named Tom Lacey with the BC Wildfire Service and his expertise.
Tom hikes outside.
It was challenging creating the plan. There was resistance within the community. There was resistance on a provincial political level. There was resistance within council itself. You would think that the mayor has a lot of power to do whatever they want, and they don't. The only way to get things done is by working together with your council members, who are also elected, and trying to create common visions to move projects forward. We had to find a way to educate everybody, and in doing so, The people that we needed to educate became part of the team members.
A white-haired man with a mustache wears a shirt emblazoned with the FireSmart logo.
Dan was on board day one that he came into the community.
My name is Dan Layton. I'm a retired fire chief from Logan Lake. Part of my job was to find a way of making Logan Lake FireSmart.
He was a quiet leader in the community, and he came along right at the right time and did an amazing job getting the plan implemented and the firefighters taught to the degree that should Logan Lake ever be tested by fire, they knew what to do.
Kelsey Winter.
One of the questions that I get asked the most in the spring is, what's fire season going to be like? It's an impossible question to answer, and so I made up my own answer for it now. And now when people ask me, what's fire season going to be like? I say it doesn't matter. There's going to be one. People will be evacuated. Homes will be impacted. We are going to have a fire season.
The date stamp scrolls to May 2021.
2021 was shaping up to be a very challenging season, very hot, very dry. But for us, for the FireSmart program, it doesn't matter. You have to be prepared regardless of what the forecast looks like.
A farm sits nestled in a valley. A man wears a cowboy hat. David Haywood Farmer, rancher, Savona.
We were concerned during the summer of 2021. We really did not have any substantial moisture until the middle of August. Yes, we had a couple of rains that may have settled the dust, but there was no rain that really meant anything.
David wanders through an outdoor workshop.
And then we had temperatures in that period that broke records. I believe there was above 50 degrees Celsius. And when you get those two combinations, dry and heavy heat, those are recipes for trouble.
Trees and yellow grass cover the hillsides in the rugged valley.
In late June of 2021, a heat dome covered the west coast of North America. In British Columbia, temperature records were shattered, with the province recording a temperature of over 50 degrees Celsius in Lytton, BC. Hundreds of deaths were attributed to what is now considered one of the deadliest weather events in Canadian history.
Robin Smith, Mayor, Logan Lake.
The heat dome. Well, that was new because none of us have really ever even seen anything like that before, living in Logan Lake for 40 plus years like I have.
Robin has long blonde hair.
And we knew for quite a while ahead through the spring that we were headed for a very, very hot summer.
Children play at a splash pad.
We had had many conversations with Environment Canada and warnings to say, you guys are headed for an incredibly hot season.
Children spray each other with water cannons. Water streams into the air from a fountain in front of the natural stone buildings of the legislature in Victoria. Inside, a woman with short hair walks down a hallway lined with arches.
My name is Jennifer Rice. I am the MLA for North Coast and BC's Parliamentary Secretary for Emergency Preparedness. We weren't really focusing on heat domes as one of the natural hazards that we focus on in fighting in British Columbia, unlike fires and floods. But certainly when we experienced the heat dome, the increase of wildfire was a huge potential, and we saw some examples of, wildfires that were related to the heat dome, and that's really concerning.
Katrine Conroy.
Our fire season started in June. We've had 5 years with 3 of the worst firefighting seasons in the history of the province, with devastating fires, and it would just kept going. We had over 4,000 personnel working on the fires last year.
Conroy is the former Minister of Forests.
I think it just goes to show that we need to keep preparing and adapting for a changing climate.
The date stamp rewinds to 2003. Ella Brown.
Property around the town was Crown land, and we couldn't manage that Crown land without the permission of the province. So we applied for a community forest, creating more jobs and opportunities and ability to FireSmart as well in that Crown land.
Workers trim and collect deadfall.
The FireSmart Youth Program started in 2003 as a way to complete the wildfire risk reduction work around Logan Lake while providing employment and forest skills to youth. This popular program continues to this day.
In the forest, workers wear hard hats and bright orange shirts. They use hand saws and rakes during cleanup. Rachel Milne.
Every day we come into the woods and we clean up all the underbrush, which is sticks, small logs. We pick them up and we put them into big piles like that, and we burn them in the fall. I work with 7 other youth. My boss is Krista, and my supervisor is Garnet.
All these kids are great. They all have their own individual personalities. This is the age that they start, as cheesy as it sounds, blossoming into their own person. So it's nice to see who they're becoming.
Krista Dick.
I'm the wellness director for the Logan Lake Wellness Health and Youth Society. Part of my job description is also FireSmart supervisor, and I am also on the volunteer fire department. It's a great experience to get to know youth in your community, see which ones are super hard workers and eager.
Landon Taylor.
I've learned lots working out here this year and last year, lots about the trees and the ground and the way fire works.
Brody Freeman.
We're all very proud of the work we've done this year too, because we've done a good job, I believe, and it's really fun too.
I am super proud of the work they do. They all come out here and work hard every day. The job they do is important to saving the community in a wildfire event.
Kelly Johnston.
There's a few communities around the province that have community forests. The intent is they have control over how the forest is managed through harvesting and all the other aspects. The first I really saw where wildfire was incorporated into the community forest to that extent was in Logan Lake.
Garnet Moreau stands in an area of tall trees.
Right now, we're in a fuel management treatment unit. This is an area that we, prior to the fire and around the community, we'd been working on. And so what we do here is we actually come through and we thin out the forest. So that means spacing. So right down here, we've got a stump. We would have cut out a lot of the smaller trees. The other part we would do is prune. And then on the ground, all the surface fuel has been sort of gathered and removed. What we're trying to do is create what we call a strata gap. And that strata gap is the distance between something on the surface and the crown of the forest. And so what we're trying to do there is just create that gap so it just keeps fire on the ground. Prior to treatment, you would have saw a very thick forest in here. You would have saw lots of branches sort of at waist height. You know, it wouldn't have been hard to visualize a fire licking up from the ground all the way up through a bole of a tree and up into the crown. And then, you know, ultimately when you're a fire loves to sort of skip across the crowns, and what we're trying to do is just interrupt that flow and influence fire behavior. Crews from the Lower Nicola Indian Band Development Corporation have been contracted to do some of the mitigation work in the Logan Lake Community Forest.
Adam Sullivan, planning forester.
The area that we are working in is called the Wildland Urban Interface, which is defined as a 2-kilometer buffer around the edge of communities. That wildland urban interface area is where we're trying to complete these field treatments so that we have a buffer between a wildfire and the edge of the community.
Jean Michel, band member.
I am a little bit older than a lot of people, and I'm still out here. I like being out in the outdoors, and I enjoy it. I feel at home out here more than anywhere else.
In the forest, Jean takes a break with other foresters.
One aspect of the work that we do and that we're trained to do as foresters is to balance multiple resource values. So in this case, that's why we're just doing a light understory hand treatment that also preserves wildlife habitat. We're minimizing impact to recreation trails. We're managing for water use and water quality and soil erosion with these treatments. We've really considered a holistic view on how we can accomplish the primary objective, which is wildfire risk reduction, with all the other objectives we have on site, which is managing for those multiple values.
David Sterling, certified hand faller.
What I'm doing out here, it's not only just for today, it's for tomorrow, right? We're all about tomorrow. This year saves communities, saves pristine land. You know, we lost a lot of country, a lot of fishing, a lot of habitat. We got to do everything we can to save what we have left. Once we open it up like this, it invites more people to walk this, to sample this, to love it. Then they understand why we care about it so much.
The date stamp advances to June 2021. Smoke wafts through a valley. A helicopter flies overhead and fire response vehicles move through traffic.
A tragic story from Lytton, BC yesterday. After days of record-breaking temperatures, an early evening fire raced through the small town, consuming everything in its wake. Residents had only moments to escape before the town was destroyed. Tragically, 2 people lost their lives in this devastating event.
Kelsey Winter.
That was the first time, that we lost a community to a fire. Very eye-opening, but I think also a good way for us to start making some changes.
A stone fireplace stands among the rubble of a house. Jennifer Rice.
I think the wildfire that severely impacted the community of Lytton was not only frightening for residents, but I think frightening for all British Columbians. While it was devastating, I think it has contributed to eyes opening in our province.
Mayor Robin Smith.
When Lytton burned, that was probably one of my lowest moments. I have never personally packed a go bag ever, and I did that night.
The lake sits at the base of a valley flanked by rugged peaks. A sign on a stone wall reads, Logan Lake.
It really opened a lot of people's eyes to say, this can be any one of us at any time. We need to be proactive, and we need to look after ourselves, and we need to be prepared. We're right smack in the middle of the forest. Despite all of the work that you do, there's always that question, we'd never been put to the test before. And so you always wonder, are we really going to stand that test when the time comes? And nobody really knew.
As the Kamloops Fire Center dealt with several major fires, the Tremont Creek Fire was discovered on July 12th near Ashcroft, BC, over 50 kilometers away from Logan Lake.
So the Tremont wildfire started, I think, not even 2 weeks after Lytton. I don't necessarily think I knew how fast the Tremont fire would go. And I think if you look at how many fires were on the landscape during that time, there was quite a few other wildfires of note. And so my particular attention wasn't necessarily on Tremont, but what a huge incident that one was.
A bald man looks out at air tankers parked on a tarmac.
My name's Hugh Murdoch. I'm a wildfire officer situated at the Kamloops Fire Center, and in the summer months I'm often leading one of 6 incident management teams. So in early July I was deployed to fires up in the Caribou Fire Center. That's when this fire started. I'm aware of that fire starting and other large fires starting just because all these fires have an impact on each other, really. We're sharing resources, we're learning from each other's fire behavior, and recognizing that it's kind of in my backyard. And then if you fast forward a few weeks, lo and behold, our team gets deployed to run the Tremont Fire and Sparks Lake Fire at the same time.
An area of red spreads on a relief map.
That became the one that we started to really watch, and it was on our radar. And it came on our radar first because it was quite close to the mine.
Randy Brown.
I really started to connect with the District of Logan Lake when Tremont started to look like it was coming towards our area. At that point in time, I think we were more concerned about it coming towards the mine than Logan Lake. We started developing a relationship where we were sharing information in terms of planned burns, what the team on the ground was seeing, what they were doing. We also had our own resources looking at the fire and keeping watch in terms of where it was, and we started to develop this network between us to make sure that we knew what was going on at any given time.
Smoke rises into the sky. A forester dressed in orange watches flames engulf tall trees.
The principles of fighting a fire. Simply put, there's 3 things that a fire needs to burn. There has to be something to burn. We call that the fuel. You need heat and you need oxygen. That does really make it sound quite simple. Just trying to get rid of one of those 3 things should stop a fire. But on large fires, that's quite a challenge.
Flames spread along the forest floor.
So when a fire spreads through the forest, from a purely mechanical perspective, it spreads from one point of ignition to another. It burns a piece of vegetation, and the heat transfer from that piece of vegetation ignites a neighboring piece of vegetation, and so on and so on. And it does that horizontally and vertically.
The top of a tree burns.
The fire will produce embers, which will blow in the wind and spot ahead of the fire and ignite vegetation or homes ahead of the fire.
Flames tower amid black smoke.
Typically, if we see fire in grasslands, it burns at a very high rate of spread, but a lower intensity. In the forest, it typically burns at a lower rate of spread, but at a much higher intensity. In some of the fires we saw in 2021, we were seeing fires that were not only burning at very high intensities, but very high rates of spread because of them being driven by wind.
A firefighter uses a hose.
Those rates of spread can reach speeds that can exceed a typical highway speed in a vehicle, and definitely faster than a human being can run.
Water is sprayed on burning trees and smoldering logs on the ground.
FireSmarting a home is making it resistant to the sparks that come in from a wildfire.
The date reads 2010.
From the community's point of view, we were mitigating on the crown land that their property abutted to. So you got to lead by example, and that's what Logan Lake was trying to do.
Homes sit on tree-lined streets in the neighborhood.
One of the things I was looking at one day when we were moving around Logan Lake, how we could mitigate those homes, get those people on board. And I'm saying they got satellite dishes on their homes, they got antennas on their homes. And I thought, why not just put a sprinkler up there? Going to the local irrigation place, put them together myself, along with another individual in the fire department, Chuck Wilkins.
Chuck is a captain.
When we were first starting it, I just went to a couple of houses and said, this is what we want to do. How it actually spread out is that people saw me on people's roofs. What's that guy doing up there? Why is the fire department on your roof? I said, yeah, he's putting a sprinkler in. Why? I had to go through this for a long time. Why?
Water sprays from a sprinkler head on the roof.
The sprinkler itself isn't designed to put out fires. That's our job. It does wet down the roof to a point, but as the heat of the day goes on, and if there's a fire on its way, water on the roof actually starts to evaporate and create a climate bubble. So the fly ash can't land on the roof because it bounces off this climate bubble. That's the reason for the sprinklers.
The homeowner would purchase the sprinkler, and when we installed it, the sprinklers are meant for wildfire protection only. They were not permitted to have the hoses. They were not permitted to turn the sprinklers on.
I would do about 12 a year. And then the more people saw me doing it and more people understood, it started to grow after that. Our system was quite cheap to put up. Originally, they cost $40 a sprinkler. And they got a FireSmart assessment.
A red truck from the Logan Lake Fire Rescue pulls up to a house. A bald man in uniform greets a homeowner.
Hey, Doug, how's it going?
Good, Peter. How are you doing this morning?
Well, good. Beautiful day.
Absolutely is. So we're here to do your assessment. You all ready for it?
You betcha.
All right, we'll get started.
Okay.
Peter leads Doug through a gate.
My name is Doug Wilson. I've been chief of Logan Lake Fire Department since October of 2020. Embers coming in would
Today, Chief Doug Wilson and other members of the Logan Lake Fire Department provide FireSmart assessments to local residents, highlighting areas where homeowners can mitigate the fire risk around their own properties.
We're just continuously implementing it, it's continuously growing. You know, you're never done. Once you think you're complete circle of the community, it starts all over because that regrowth. We look on this side, the surface. You've got your ground fuel here. There's quite a bit. It's just an ongoing thing year after year. It's not a one and done for sure.
Chuck Wilkins.
The FireSmart program now is more concise. It deals with up next to the house, around the house. It actually tells you how far the siding should be from ground level, and it talks about tree height.
With your trees overhanging your property and your neighbor's trees, you don't have control of that. Your gutters will get filled up with debris, leaves, pine needles. We need to get up there and clean that out occasionally to keep the debris out of that gutter, because that's what's going to catch on fire when the ambers come floating in.
So we normally get the gutters cleaned out twice a year. Is that enough?
That is perfect. Yes, absolutely is. Yeah, and then when we up there, we can activate your sprinkler system, and you're golden.
With the new FireSmart system and the addition of the sprinklers, it works. A lot of people are going to save their homes because they do the right thing.
Kelsey Winter.
One of the parts of the FireSmart program that's been developed a lot in the last 3 to 5 years is the structure protection piece, the integration between FireSmart and suppression. If you FireSmart your home, that structure protection, that suppression, it works that much better.
The date stamp scrolls to July 2021.
Knowing that we had been very, very lucky for a very, very long time, and the activity that was out there in 2021 was way more harsh than we had ever seen before. So it was just a feeling, really, I think, more than anything. This could be our year.
Haze hangs over the valley.
On July 20th, the province of British Columbia declared a state of emergency due to the significant threat of wildfire. Over 500 fires were burning across the province. Small at first, the Tremont Creek fire began quietly gaining strength and speed.
Neil Rideout, Deputy Chief.
The closer Tremont fire got to us, it put it to the forefront that we're going to have to start to do something here. And then we started preparing ourselves by looking at our equipment and what we have and how can we deploy it, and extra training in those aspects.
With the Tremont Creek fire looming in the distance, the town of Logan Lake was put on evacuation alert on July 30th. Residents were instructed to be prepared to leave at a moment's notice.
When we first went on alert, we had been watching what happened at Lytton. We'd been watching what was happening around us. And I think that as much as it was frightening for people, I think it was also necessary, and they knew that. The trouble was the fact that we were on alert for 13 days. People do start to become somewhat complacent and saying, are we overdoing it by being on alert right now?
Kids play on swings.
When you start to get, 10 days in and you're realizing nothing's happened yet, people start to doubt.
Haze hangs over the town.
If you have taken steps on your property to prepare it for wildfire, you're also preparing yourself and your family. You're knowing that if you have to evacuate or if you're forced to leave at a moment's notice, that you've done everything that you can do to protect your home.
The date reads August 2021.
Our team was deployed to this fire early in the second week of August.
Hugh Murdoch.
There'd been weeks and weeks of super hot, dry weather. The winds are predominantly out of the southwest in that area, but there was a wind shift forecasted to switch, which would take the fire and push it right past Tunkville Lake and right in towards the community of Logan Lake.
On the map, a shaded area displays the projected path of the fire. Smoke intensifies in the valley, obscuring the horizon. Mayor Robin Smith.
People were starting to get a little bit more concerned.
In an aerial view, the town remains visible through the smoke.
I would go outside and I would sort of say, what does the smoke look like today? And I would walk to the end of my driveway and see where the smoke was coming from.
A car travels on a highway.
I went up to the fire hall and we took a drive out on the Tunkville Lake Road. And we got as far as Ware Lake. And when I looked and saw the Ware Lake sign and saw that the fire was indeed on that side of the road now, we knew at that point that it wasn't good.
A woman with braids looks up.
My name's Jean Finlay. We lived in Kamloops for almost 35 years and raised our kids, and then we always dreamt of having a little piece of property, and we found this place.
Trees surround properties in Jean's neighborhood.
We're located in what is referred to in Logan Lake as the acreages. When I got the text that we were probably going to get evacuated at lunchtime, I just started scrambling. So I came outside, my husband was working outside with his hoses and everything, doing sprinkling, and he's like, no. And I said, yeah, it's coming quickly. And I said, I think we're going to be evacuated. And both of us were like, well, what do we do? Like, it's you think you're prepared, but you're not prepared.
At the tarmac, Hugh Murdoch.
The community of Logan Lake and surrounding areas had been under an evacuation alert for a number of weeks already. And it was on about our 4th or 5th day of deployment that we put the evacuation order in place for the community of Logan Lake.
Entering a kitchen inside a home, a cell phone on a kitchen island comes into focus. An alert displays on the phone screen.
The directive came out between 3 and 3:30 in the afternoon that we were evacuating the community of Logan Lake. Folks had to be out of their homes by 6 o'clock.
The date stamp reads Thursday, 4 p.m.
We knew this was coming. So we figured, okay, we have time. And when the structural protection unit guy said, this is what's happening, the fire is coming towards us. It will come to Logan Lake. You guys need to go. And then everything else kicked in. Once that decision was made, was like it went from 0 to 60 like in no time at all.
Wade Archambault, Director, Public Works and Recreation, EOC Operations Section Chief.
We're sitting in the Emergency Operations Center and we're looking around at a handful of people. The fear in our eyes when we first, how do we evacuate the community? Where to begin? Right at that moment, people started pouring through the doors. I remember racing down to the Public Works Department. I knew I had a large map of the community on my wall in sections, and I tore it off the wall to the point where drywall was sticking to the back of it, and raced back up there, and we pieced it out on a massive table there so we can start circling it so that everyone can fit around it. Okay, now we gotta go door to door.
Bungalows line streets in a residential neighborhood.
We had obviously RCMP. They brought up a lot of outside jurisdictions. Search and rescue was involved. Conservation officers were here. Commercial vehicle inspectors were here. Pretty much anybody with authority that could help us jumped in. No questions asked.
A woman transports a dog in a carrier. Chris Candy.
We had a lot of help. Every door was knocked on. When we were on alert, the fire was a long ways off. Okay, when we went on order, that's when it became more personal to me. We're gonna have to protect their homes and property and pets even in some cases and that, and I know all these people.
Luggage is loaded in a car.
So our main priority was to get everybody out of town.
It went fast. It did seem chaotic, but controlled at the same time.
Krista Dick, FireSmart Youth Program.
When we got the evacuation, I had to be concerned about the kids and not think about my family. I had to make sure all those kids left and their parents picked them up. It was crazy being concerned about about other people's kids and not my own that were still here. Sorry.
Jean Findlay.
Until the day we got evacuated, it's almost like you feel invincible that it's not going to happen to you. I'd left a little bit later than what a lot of people did. It was desolate already. It was just bizarre. There was nobody around. Police cars parked on the corners. Got onto the Meadow Creek Road and turning onto Mammoth, I actually came to a congested area and everybody was heading out with their trucks and trailers and we were at almost a standstill because it was just so congested. You could see the look and the disbelief in people's eyes when they were in their vehicles. Everybody just looked panicked. At that point, we didn't know if our town was going to burn down. We didn't know that.
The town of Logan Lake successfully evacuated over 2,300 residents in only 3 hours.
I think that the community of Logan Lake as a whole took the evacuation seriously, and I think they made much of their time when they were under alert to take sort of necessary precautions and steps to minimize the impacts on their personal land.
I thought the residents did an incredible job. I thought they were very respectful, they were reasonable, they did what they were supposed to do, and I was very, very proud of our little community actually at that time.
A main street sits empty. Doug Wilson.
Once the town was empty, we kind of felt alone. It was strange, very eerie.
It felt like a war zone. You would drive around and the only thing you would see was emergency vehicles slowly driving around town with their lights on, and the most eerie feeling you could ever imagine, preparing for that kind of an event and knowing there's nobody else here. We're it. This is all. So what we can do is what we can do right now.
Firefighters sit in a circle.
Yeah, that Thursday night was quite a different night, as we were driving around till way past midnight, turning on and off sprinklers and just nobody.
Ryan Wilson.
It's quite a different atmosphere. We arrived at the hall Thursday night. We were told to go home and get some sleep, and we'd be coming back Friday for a busy Friday.
The date stamp advances to Friday, 7 a.m.
I arrived here at 7 a.m. and the rec center was pretty much 3/4 full of all the other fire trucks. So that's when it really was like, wow, this is a big event. We're in for it now.
Incoming trucks started coming in, fire departments. Some who have never heard of Logan Lake, some we've never heard of. Many drove overnight that night from the east of our province, getting here at 6, 7 in the morning. So yeah, everything just started coming together.
A firefighter checks equipment in a truck.
My name is Jared Gaudry, and I'm a City of Kamloops firefighter. I've lived in Logan Lake for 15 years. I knew that they were sending a truck from here, so I asked if I could go help. They had no issues with me going, and so I went with the crew up there.
Landon Dick.
I think as fast as the community left, these guys and gals started showing up.
Once all the crews start coming in, you see all these fire apparatus and all these protection units and all the rest of it. To me, it brought the town back. It brought hope.
We met over at the ice rink. We had a formal get-together at 7 in the morning, and off to work they all went.
In a photo, the gathered firefighters stand in a circle in the parking lot.
We got split up into a bunch of different task forces, they call them. We were our own task force in Logan Lake.
My team, the Logan Lake Fire, were structural protection. If a property or building here was to catch on fire, we were going to deal with it. Wildfire Service, with the incoming 38 different companies that showed up, they did the structural support.
A ladder and a hose are unloaded from a truck.
We assisted where we could that first day, dragging hose, laddering homes, hooking sprinklers up. I think we had 26 bladder bags set up throughout the community to take water to the system that we were building. Burnaby sacrificed their truck and put it right against the lake down here. Brought water out of the lake into their truck and then pumped it up to the highway where we had 3 bags, which made life easier for the other trucks to back into to fill up from. So there was a lot of sacrifices made from individual companies incoming and members themselves to make everything work.
They drained down the lake by over 2 feet, pumping water into bladders. Our fire department walked around and they FireSmarted every single property of Logan Lake that was on the perimeter that they could FireSmart, on the chance that an ember might fly in and light something that sparked a flame somewhere. That could very well be the flame that takes you out. So we really just doubled down on everything.
Rooftop sprinklers activate.
We had a designated Zone 1, 2, and 3. Zone 1 is ground zero for the fire. Zone 2 is slightly off to one side where they thought it was going to go. And then Zone 3 was the very edge of where the fire might have went.
On the map, the shaded area creeps closer to Logan Lake.
The fire was kind of way back in the woods behind the acreages. You could see it along the tree lines.
Maxine Chapman, Unit Crew Leader, BCWS.
I believe it was our last 2 days on that fire that we were shifted over to the Logan Lake side. The wind was quite aggressive, and with those large fires, they can create a little bit of their own weather system.
Flames appear in swirling smoke.
So there's this wind that it generates, sucking the air towards it. And it's quite disarming, but simultaneously you have a lot of adrenaline going. Those shifts are the ones that you end up getting pulled in for 16, 18, 24, 30 hours with minimal sleep, minimal times to sit down and eat. It's not the most glamorous work.
The date stamp advances to Saturday, 8 a.m.
The second day, things changed. We realized that the food wasn't being adequately supplied for the work that was being put out for the members here 12 hours a day. I received a phone call from our local grocer, the manager. Mario called me and said, hey, I'm at the checkpoint, they won't let me in. I have a key to the grocery store. Just use anything you want because we're going to lose everything in there anyway. So I rushed out there, met him, got his key. I immediately came back, went over there, had a look around to see what was going, what wasn't going.
Using food from the grocery store, volunteers, including spouses of firefighters, district staff, and council members, took over the cafe kitchen and prepared meals for crews.
The individual here, Dave Morrison, that runs our Petrocan gas station, came in and opened up the gas station to be sure that the trucks had the fuel they needed. And he came in every day to make sure it was operational, that people got what they needed. He also gave away all the water, Gatorade, till he ran out with his stuff. That was definitely not part of the plan. It just kind of fell in place. So the community support with our different commercial businesses in town here really came together to make a lot of this happen.
Billowing smoke obscures blue skies.
As the Tremont Creek Wildfire rolled towards Logan Lake, local ranches were left directly in its path.
Cattle are herded with ATVs and on horseback. Les Leduc,
You really feel for those ranchers.
wildfire technician.
You could tell that they had been through a couple of very hard days. The ranchers, they experienced a lot of loss. They had lost some cattle. At that point, the ranchers didn't realize how many cattle they had lost, but I had seen some cattle that were quite compromised while I was driving towards them. Their fences were down. Sadly, there were some burnt that we could see.
Smoke seeps along the forest floor. David Haywood Farmer.
Oh, that's it. We lost in between 40 and 50 head of cows. And we lost our woodlot. It was really, really damaged.
By losing their woodlot, the ranchers lost another source of income.
It's just really, really tough to stomach looking at those girls that are out there making your living for you, and then they're burned because of a big monster wildfire.
The date stamp advances to Saturday, 1 p.m.
In the early afternoon hours, I was touring the fire with some of the ranching community, not really close to Logan Lake. We'd been on the ground quite a bit looking at the fire behavior and discussing tactics. We got up in the air and were able to do a circuit. And I'll vividly remember, having to fly wider and wider around this large column that's forming. And then finally we get around it and you see how close the fire is getting to Logan Lake. And we're flying closer and closer to Logan Lake. We're basically over top of it. And looking down at these cul-de-sacs, and in each cul-de-sac you'd see different firefighting equipment and thinking, wow, they look so small. And in my mind, all I could think was that this is either going to be a great day for Logan Lake or a horrible day.
A wall of smoke advances. Fire consumes treetops.
Then we narrowed it down to Saturday afternoon that it was definitely going to come in on us.
On the map, the shaded area creeps closer.
I knew that we had a lot of resources deployed, and I knew that they could get to a safe place. So I thought we were really prepared for a good fight.
Chuck Wilkins.
And then we started to do radical FireSmart. Everything gets thrown from the house. We were throwing quads, we were throwing propane tanks. All that had to go. Once we did the very first house, then everybody just sort of took off in groups. We all worked together, house after house after house.
Maxine Chapman.
We were working on a fuel-free, so that's removing any trees in an area and any fuel in order to stop the fire where it currently is. But we were pulled off of that and pulled into town.
Kathleen Cahoon.
So we got pulled off our original objective, went to Logan Lake, and it was just trying to stay calm, cool, collected, get your thought process through. It was a lot of don't think too much, just kind of go with your gut decisions.
A plume of smoke billows.
You can hear the wind from the fire. It sounds kind of like a jet. That's when you know that fire's close.
A wall of smoke advances toward a neighborhood.
And there was no planes at that time. And then once you started to see the twisting of the smoke, You start to get a little worried, and it was that real dark smoke.
That fire made everything else in the area look really, really small. There was a very large wall of flame methodically marching towards Logan Lake and a huge column of smoke coming off of that and tipped over towards the community. That made it challenging, obviously, because of fire behavior, but also the smoke would impact the visibility for the aircraft.
The sky turns dark gray.
They wouldn't be able to see their targets.
Thick smoke surrounds the town. The smoke hides the surrounding hills in an aerial view.
Then all of a sudden the power went out. And we were down towards the acreage and we could see it rolling in us. The gray, dirty, black smoke coming. And then it got close enough we could see the flames. And we knew it was definitely coming in.
Mayor Robin Smith.
When we knew we no longer had power, it was like, ooh, that's not good.
That was a bad day.
And that evening, the fire chief called me and said, Jean, I need to let you know we're probably not going to save your house today.
In an aerial view, a home stands surrounded by trees.
At that point, we thought we may lose some structures. We just didn't know what. We weren't willing to just roll over and walk away.
Chris Candy.
I had run out of things that I could do. I didn't know what to do next, so I just jumped in with the fire chief and tried to help out on the fire line as best I could. There was a point where I thought we were losing houses down in the acreages and on Breccia. You know, and that's members of the fire department, people that I know, people that work at the district. Yeah, it was really bad.
James Stalzer, firefighter.
Got crazy there for a bit, seeing the fire come in. We were up on one of the streets looking down towards the acreages, and we were sure the acreages were gone. We get a call on the radio for everyone to go back to the rec center for a meeting, and that's when it really 100% became real. They're like, it's coming. It's only a matter of time now.
Landon Dick.
Being called back is when I thought the town was gone. I thought they were getting us all out. Because it was, the fire's right there and you're calling us back. I wish I would have taken pictures, but we came around and there was more equipment. I'm just like, holy geez, we're going to war. This is nuts. They gave us our marching orders and everybody dispersed. Dozers, water trucks, and everything, crews going everywhere. It was just very impressive to see how organized it was and how these people came to save our community.
Ryan Wilson.
Yeah, we were told to go to Breccia by the fire boss. He met us there. And he pointed at 3 houses and said, these 3 houses need to be protected. These are the 3 that are in danger. And of course, the middle house was my house. And we created a fire break line down there. All of our members were down there digging the fire line.
They lit off a back burn and hundreds of feet of tree line blew up in flames. And we thought, holy smokes, is that the fire? And no, it's just a back burn.
On the map, the shaded area grows larger. Maxine Chapman.
We were in the community and watching this fire advance on us and knowing that we were doing as much as we could do, but the force of that fire was significant. And I had one person come up to me and ask me at what point we should leave. And I didn't have an answer for them. I didn't know at what point you leave during an event like that.
Finally, the wind that had been pushing the fire directly towards Logan Lake shifted.
Hugh Murdoch.
The wind had been pushing that fire right toward Logan Lake for a number of hours. You know, that wind shift was within half an hour or less of the fire literally knocking on the doors of Logan Lake.
Jared Gaudry.
You could feel the wind, it shifted, and you could watch the smoke.
An air tanker approaches.
When that first plane went overhead at Jean's house, I was pretty happy.
A cloud of red fire retardant spews from the plane.
And then all of a sudden, plane after plane after plane. They were going to do the best they can. whoever made that call made the right decision.
Hugh Murdoch.
Then instead of having the head of the fire barreling down at Logan Lake, we just had a really long flank.
They stopped it coming towards Logan Lake. It went sideways.
I saw that, then there was like an instant relief almost to know that these guys were right. All the preparation was done right.
A helicopter carries a monsoon bucket.
That's when I thought we might have a chance. Yeah.
You were looking down, you see big billows of black smoke, and you're thinking that was definitely a house or a piece of equipment or something. But no, we got lucky. Really, really lucky.
It came within, I think, 50 feet of a home down in the acreages. With our fire smarting in the past, Mother Nature shift change at the last minute, pushed it east, and we were able to control it out that way as to where we wanted it to go.
Brandon Bram, equipment operator, Public Works.
We worked hard all day to do everything we could to help save the community, and then it looked like the fire was moving past. It was an extraordinary sight, standing on the end of the dock of Logan Lake and looking at the hillside that's still on fire, but the way that it was moving, it wasn't a danger anymore. The fire crews that were here took time to get a bite to eat and just take in what we accomplished on that day just to save the community, and to watch it carry on was a very calming sight, even though what we were looking at was still chaos.
At night, the orange glow from the fire is reflected in the lake. Jean Finley.
It was the next day, I get this text from an unknown number. And it's a picture of my house with the hoses everywhere. It says, "We saved it." I'll never forget that moment. And so I said, "Who is this?" And he goes, "Jean, it's Doug."
During the week of the fire, the BC Wildfire Service deployed structural protection apparatus and crews from across the province to Logan Lake. An army of over 200 wildfire and structural protection commanders and crews were on the ground and in the air, doing what they could to keep the town safe.
I don't want to miss for a second the fact that there was a wind shift that was favorable for sure and came at the last minute. I guess what I would say is that it was a perfect combination of so many different efforts that were taking place right then in the days before, and then also, of course, the efforts that had gone into the fire smarting of the community for years prior to. You know, there was heavy equipment pushing in machine guard. There was helicopters and air tankers working from the air. And then the ground crews, they're running hoses and doing ignitions on the ground. And they're all working on the same piece of ground, and it was ground that had been treated for FireSmart reasons.
The aftermath of the fire is displayed in before and after photos.
Those air resources are far more effective on that ground because there's less fuel to intercept the retardant in the water. The heavy equipment, the bulldozers and whatnot that are pushing in guard were way faster because there's fewer trees in the way. Every community is different. They'll have their own uniquenesses, but I think Logan Lake's FireSmart model is a great model for communities.
Garnet walks through a section of forest.
We're only about 200 meters from the nearest house of Logan Lake. Because it was treated, it was an easier decision for the incident command team to make, in the sense that they knew that it was safe for their crews. They had good visuals. You can see through here for a long ways. And that's a big factor when you're, under time constraints and things are happening fast. You have to make quick decisions. One of the ways that we measure success for our treatments is to really look at after fire what was left. And one of the things that really surprised me is when you get down here and you look at around our stumps, we still have lots of this. This is our fine fuels. These little sticks and twigs. And in some cases, there's patches of grass that didn't burn. So the fact that the whole thing didn't get consumed in the fire after that severe drought is a real good measure of success. The other key piece is just, above us, when I look up and I see a nice green canopy, all these trees are alive. And we're really predicting like 95% of these trees are gonna survive the fire, because they had a nice light underburn, which is kind of what nature would have done in the first place. So it's an all-around positive thing.
A section of charred trees appears in an aerial view.
And now we're in an area here that was untreated, and it's important to note that we're only about, say, 100 meters from the last area that was treated. And the first thing you'll see is the fire behavior was significantly different here. The fire has gone up into the crown. All of the crown above us is gone. Surface fuel loading, well, it was pretty high, and there really isn't much on the ground anymore. You have some large diameter woody material here, but ultimately those smaller pieces that are like pencil size, they've just gone, they're disappeared. And then of course the duff layer itself, which is, that organic layer just above the ground, it's more or less consumed as well in the fire. So you have this thin layer of ash on top of dirt. And I think what's important for context is to understand that this is the level of impact that we call high to extreme burn severity. And this goes for another 10 kilometers or so in the whole watershed. So it's a pretty significant impact when you think about the land base and all the other values that go with it.
Kelsey Winter.
What we're starting to be able to communicate to the public, and it's something that we hear from our structure protection specialists, or those folks that are out there actually putting sprinklers up on houses, is that if you fire smart your home, their resources, that structure protection, that suppression, it works that much better. So if they're driving down a neighborhood and they're deciding which houses they're going to protect, they're going to pick the FireSmart ones because they have a much higher likelihood of survival. And so FireSmart doesn't just protect your home, it protects the first responders that are out there trying to put out the wildfire and protect your property, but it also makes it more likely that the suppression will work.
Fire trucks sit parked on the side of the road at the entrance to the town.
It was very overwhelming to be able to welcome our residents back home to their homes still standing. There was a lot of rumors out there that we had lost stuff, lost structures, but to see our residents come back home, that was good.
Residents drive past the fire trucks.
They lifted the evacuation order and were permitting people to come back. We had all the trucks lined up along the main road there to welcome people in. And I think that was the hardest part for a few of us, just watching people drive in and they're crying.
Yeah. The other department stayed. They didn't have to. It was just going to be our department, and we had all the other crews from all over, and the trucks lined up, welcoming everybody back. So it was pretty cool to see. I don't know how many times that happens, but
I think the one that stands out the most for me is we had a member that was only 19 at the time, and his mom pulled the car over right in the middle of it, jumped out, ran over, and gave him the biggest hug, and that was it. And a lot of our members, had something in their eyes at that time. It was touching.
A banner at the fire hall reads, "Welcome to our FireSmart community." Councillor Gary Yude.
People were coming home crying, seeing them all out there. And even overwhelmed that many people cared, And the town did come together. There's no doubt about that. It's like a big family here,
Residents mingle at a barbecue. Marion Bell, councillor.
Our house was about 200 yards from the fire. The sprinkler system that they'd put on the roof had obviously saved our house. We drove up to the house and I said, "Hello, house, I'm so glad you're still here."
Firefighters don their uniforms in a locker room.
We're a pretty tightly knit group. We got even tighter during the fires, spending all day, all night with each other.
They gather in the station, many with their helmets on.
We've taken on 9 new people since the fire. The senior people now are guiding these new people.
A truck rolls out at night, lights flashing.
It has brought new life to us.
Firefighters exit the truck and attach a hose.
We all have our different reasons for why we joined, but I think the common goal at the end, to keep people safe.
We had crews working on that fire for weeks. After people returned to Logan Lake, our crews just get redeployed to other fires throughout the province.
Propellers spin on a helicopter.
I'm happy to see that we've had a win after we've had, a number of losses in communities. And the more we move forward with fires occurring across the landscape, we're going to see more tests.
You can't drop your guard because a fire's gone through. You're right, we only have
one side of the town that was on fire. And there's a lot more woods out there and a lot more fuel for us. So we have to keep up with everything we do, FireSmart especially. It's just as dangerous as it was before.
A sign along the highway reads, Canada's first FireSmart community, 2013, Logan Lake, Fire Protection Achievement.
So where does the FireSmart program go from here?
Kelsey Winter.
I'm so encouraged by the growth that we've had just in the last 2 years. There's 26 regional districts in the province and 210 First Nations, and my goal in the next 2 years is to have a FireSmart program in all of those places.
Hugh Murdoch.
Firefighting in the future is going to look different. It looks different today than it did 20 years ago as well. The people of British Columbia have to accept that wildfire is going to be part of the fabric of our communities and our province as a whole.
Katrine Conroy.
We can't just wait for government to protect us from wildfires. We all have a responsibility to do our part to ensure that we are doing what we can to prevent wildfires as well.
Logan Lake has a special place in my heart just because it was the first FireSmart community in Canada, not just in BC. But I think for me why I love Logan Lake so much is because they went all in. They've been doing it for decades. Their fire departments are involved, their government's involved, their citizens are involved. It's really been a large-scale effort and something that they've committed to in the long term. Change doesn't happen overnight. You can't say, I'm gonna have a FireSmart neighborhood and within a week it's FireSmart. It's a commitment, and Logan Lake made that commitment, and that's why we still have it there today.
The town and the lake appear in an aerial view under a partly cloudy sky. Words appear. We acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the Tecumloops Tsewa'umph people, on land that is situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Tsewa'umph Nation. We filmed in the traditional territories of the Inklapomak and Syilx Okanagan peoples, as well as the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, who are today represented by the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. We are grateful for their stewardship. Dedicated to the memories of Tom Lacey, Chris Candy, Claire Newman, Al Smith, champions of the people and the forest. Credits, described video by Descriptive Video Works, written by Bixie Jean, narrated by Paula Hoffman, written and directed by Vesta Giles, produced by Vesta Giles, director of photography Joseph Person, featuring Garnet Moreau, Kelsey Winter, Kelly Johnston, Ella Brown, Dan Layton, Mayor Robin Smith, Chief Doug Wilson, Hugh Murdoch, Parliamentary Secretary Jennifer Rice, Minister Katrine Conroy, Kathleen Cahoon, Maxine Chapman, Les Leduc, Brandon Bram, Wade Archambault, Marion Bell, Chris Candy, Peter Martell, Gary Yude, Landon Dick, Krista Dick, Drazana German, Al Goodrich, Alex Jolicure, Kyle Konowalchuk, Mike Lees, Ocean Maygard, Callie Patterson, Alex Patterson, Neil Rideau, Kyle Shore, James Stalzer, Chuck Wilkins, Ryan Wilson, Gerard Gaudry, Adam Sullivan, Don Gosso, Trey Lamel, Ernie McIver, Jean Michelle, Craig Shinta, David Sterling, Brody Freeman, Liam Gilmore, Zach Lussieu, Rachel Milne, Landon Taylor. Thank you, the people of Logan Lake, FireSmartBC, Kelsey Winter and Rachel Woodhouse, Garnet Moreau, Kelly Johnston, Dan Layton, BC Wildfire Service staff and administration, District of Logan Lake Fire Rescue, Kamloops Fire Rescue, Minister Conroy, Parliamentary Secretary Rice, Kamloops Local Media, David and Bonnie Haywood Farmer, Chris Farmer, Lower Nicola Indian Band Development Corporation, Brandon Bram, the Cowell family. Logos appear. Cooperators, British Columbia FireSmart, Gravity Fair Productions. Words appear. Some scenes have been reenacted. Van Delso Productions. Copyright 2024 Van Delso Productions Incorporated.